Well, Linus is back and Luke is back yet again. They're back talking more about Linux and all that fun jargon. Honestly, there really isn't a whole lot to talk about in this video, just because it was mostly, doing random office work kind of stuff, working on printers, which, surprisingly, that printer did work very well for Linus. I do have a slight story, and we'll get to that when we get to that. Yeah, there really isn't a whole lot that we can talk about in this video. I mostly want to talk about stuff that Linus commented on at the end of the video, or at the end of this specific video. So once we get to there, we'll get to there. For the time being, let's get through all the minor things that I wanted to go over just in the beginning part, or the first, 2/3 of the video.
This is really annoying. macOS does this too. There's no refresh button in Dolphin, so you can't force it to refresh. And I know what the philosophy is. The philosophy is you're not supposed to need to refresh. Well, sometimes I do! So you need to have the button. Sorry, it's just I'm still angry about this from 7 or 8 years ago, or whenever I did my macOS Daily Driver Challenge.
That I do want to comment on, because let me go ahead and I'm going to minimize my web browser. We're going to throw this down here, and let's actually bring up Dolphin. All right, because I am also running KDE Plasma. And let's point out, hey, look at that. I got a refresh button up on my Dolphin page. By the way, the irony is not lost on me that the file browser in KDE Plasma is called Dolphin. I just wanted to acknowledge that before we move on. Anyway, so why do I have a refresh button when Linus doesn't? Well, that's because what you can do is you can go up here in the back arrows, and you can right click and hit configure toolbars. And here you go. You can see all of the different things you can put on your toolbar in Dolphin, and there is quite a bit. You can throw quite a bit of stuff on here. I don't know how much I'll need all this stuff, but knowing that this stuff is present is a very good thing to have. And as you can see, I threw my refresh tab on there. I got icons, compact details. I might get rid of those buttons. I don't really use them a whole lot. But everything else, I like the way that it's default set up. And that's actually one of the small things I wanted to bring up. Why is the refresh button not there by default? If it's there and you can enable it, why isn't it there by default? Just, I don't know. One of those things that the KDE developers could work on in the future. Just put the refresh button on there by default,
Print the Word doc. Okay. That was probably the easiest and best printing experience I've pretty much ever had. I didn't detect that printer, I didn't install that printer, I didn't do anything. I know from previously using Mint, I've seen the pop-up in the top right-hand corner come up being like, this printer has connected. But I never did anything for it, and yeah.
This printer is actually a pain in the ass to get working on Windows, because I think the last time it got a driver was either Vista or Windows 7. I actually have it saved to a folder on my server because there's no other place that I can find it, or I can, but it's a real chore. You have to extract it from some other thing. It's a very giant pain in the butt. This just worked as far as I can tell, but until I actually see the page, I'm not ready to believe it. Yeah! Nice. I was gonna say I've never been so happy to see a page printed out of a printer, but actually getting something to print is one of those things that pretty much every time you need to do it, it's kind of urgent and kind of a pain in the ass. So no, I've been through this a lot.
The printer stuff. Everybody's gonna comment on the printer stuff, I can already tell. Cause yeah, running printers and more importantly, scanners is extremely easy on Linux. I actually have a little bit of an anecdote. So in the video that came out today, the same day that this video is coming out, I told a small story about how I won a Logitech video making competition. And in order to properly sign any documents that Logitech sent to me and send that in as a finalist, I had to scan my signature and throw that in and email that to them. Here's the problem. The only scanner that I have in this house is from 1997, or 1996. So, aka before I was born. So, trying to install that on Windows was a gigantic pain in the ass. When I won the contest, this was before I switched over to Linux, so that's why I was still using Windows on my machine. However, my dad was running Linux at the time. So what we did is I took that scanner, brought it to him, and he plugged it in, and it just worked. Like, he was able to just use that scanner to scan out a fucking file and email it for me to win that $5,000. So, if anything, desktop Linux good for the work, the work office, like the workspace. Maybe, I don't know. It's the work office. I'm a fucking Nimrod.
Challenge number 6, compress and send all the files on this drive. Okay, compress here as .zip. Why is it .zip.uqjqfu? Holy crap, Andy, you know what? I think I just fell for the same thing that I said I wouldn't fall for again. Compress here as .zip. It was doing it down here, and I didn't notice. So I guess the 6 characters or whatever here is just random gibberish while it's a temporary file. I should change this font back.
Okay, so that is another little thing. In running KDE Plasma, you know, all my pop-ups come in the bottom right-hand corner of all of my monitors. So even if I'm doing something on this monitor, that pop-up's gonna go all the way around over here to the bottom right of this monitor. I'm used to it at this point because I've recognized that, like, oh, this is just what KDE Plasma does, and it just sends it down to the bottom right corner, and I gotta keep my eye on that little chunk of the screen. That's why my clock is there and a bunch of other stuff is down there in that corner. But I can't quite defend that the defense of, oh, I'm used to it, therefore it's not a problem, isn't actually a defense or a counter argument. Yeah, I mean, if we're doing something like compressing files, maybe have that show up in the actual Dolphin menu, maybe have like a little dial that shows up on the window or a progress bar, or like, I don't know, something would be nice. Maybe there's a setting that I can mess with that I showed in that little window that I had previously. I don't fucking know. I have to do a little bit more digging on that. But the fact that it's not there by default, a little bit baffling. Just like there are minor problems with KDE Plasma. I like it. I personally like the whole setup, and I've had a fine time using it. There are little UI and UX, not so much gotchas, but more like hiccups that you just got to get used to. Like, all the pop-ups show up in the bottom right corner. It makes sense. It's not the easiest to read at times, especially someone like Linus who has that gigantic fucking monitor in front of him. I can see why he ran into this problem.
I do have little complaints, like that the Show Desktop button doesn't actually minimize anything, and as soon as you grab a focus application, everything comes ripping back onto the screen.
That's another, let me interject here, that's another little thing that I've been able to adjust. Here, let's minimize the video again, and let's talk about the taskbar down here on the bottom. The taskbar is not pre-built. You can adjust it, you can modify it, you can throw widgets on there. Like you can see here on this monitor, and this monitor only, I have a little individual core usage tab and a total CPU usage tab. Just down there at all times, just so that I can see them. I would like to have one for my graphics card, but because I run an NVIDIA graphics card, I'm not holding my breath for that. I would like to have it though. Now, on KDE Plasma by default, you would see this button down here, and mine says minimize all windows because you can add a widget that minimizes all windows. And by default, again, the widget that you see right there is show desktop, not minimize all windows. And I can kind of see where they're coming from, but at the same time, minimize all windows, I feel, achieves the same thing, but actually minimizes all the windows, as opposed to show desktop, which is just show the desktop, and then once you bring a window out, everything comes rushing back into the screen. I don't see a reason why you would have the show desktop button when the minimize all windows button does more. Again, it's a default thing that's just kind of baffling that that's how that works, you know? Again, another little hiccup with KDE, but I still recommend it, you know? Learn from my mistakes, take this information that I have and actually make something more usable with your desktop environment. You know, just a little thing.
Honestly, some of my dumbest problems have been caused by my default file manager, Dolphin. Among other things, it does not allow the user to copy anything into a folder that requires administrative privileges, with no obvious way to override it in the GUI. And I've run into this twice so far. Adding insult to injury, the community responses to this user who shared my concern that not everyone wants to copy files using the terminal, and that Linux should allow the user to do what they want to do with their computer, were some of the most painfully condescending and stubborn things that I've had the displeasure of reading throughout this challenge. Now, I lost my link to the tweet, unfortunately, but I saw an interesting criticism of this series that basically accused me and Luke of intentionally smearing Linux and its developers because we were going to come into this with a basic Windows gamer perspective and try to do things the way that they do things. Well, newsflash, guys, that's most people. And if you legitimately, like in your heart of hearts, want Linux desktop to grow, you need to accommodate those people. So you can sit there and go, am I out of touch? No, it's the users who are wrong. But you're literally a meme at that point. The only question is whether you're self-aware or not.
Well, that depends. I strongly believe that enthusiast distros for advanced users should stay advanced. There is immense raw potential in an unfettered experience. It is important for new users wishing to eventually achieve mastery of a system, and for current masters of that system to be afforded full control and responsibility in order to maximize their ability to learn, grow, and realize potential. That being said, not everything fits under that umbrella. There are distros out there more for gamers or inexperienced users, so for those systems, we really hope that there's a lot of good that can come from us doing this. We also don't want to paint everyone in the Linux community with the same brush, because it's a diverse bunch of people with a wide range of experience with Linux. People like Wendell from Level 1 Techs, Jason Evangelo from Linux for Everyone, and Gardner Bryant from Gardner Bryant have been inviting and supportive not just to us, but to fans of the channel following in our footsteps, which is super cool. But
something that the good eggs in the Linux community need to understand, though, is that you guys are great, and there's lots of you. It's just that it only takes a couple of toxic gatekeepers to turn people off. Like, you gotta remember, it's not always easy for people to reach out and ask for help, and if a literal developer of their distro goes out of their way to type extra unnecessary words to be condescending when they could have just pointed the user to the resources that they needed, it is extremely damaging to the good work that the majority is trying to do.
Okay, so I know that was a long clip, and I have a lot to unpack with all of these claims. I agree half with Linus when he said that Linux should be accommodating for the average Windows user. Because yes, it absolutely, like the statement on its own, I do agree with. Linux should be accommodating to Windows users looking to migrate. Absolutely. At the same time, however, I'm of the opinion that you can't solve all problems in Linux the same way you can solve them on Windows, because they're different operating systems. So while I do wish for more accommodation for the average Windows user or for Grandma Beatrice down the street, at the same time, it's not reasonable to expect everything to conform with the way that you understand it. And that's just kind of something that a lot of people do, myself included. We all do this, right? So I can see where Linus is frustrated. I can absolutely see why he got frustrated with a lot of the stuff that he's run into in Linux. But in my experience, and I know that, wow, a good way to write a defense is in my experience, but listen to me for a second. In my experience, Linux became easier to understand and easier to use when I stopped trying to look at things from a Windows perspective. Now, whenever I handled problems in Windows, there would be a few ways I would go about it. It would be check the control panel, it would be check, if my drivers are working or not, and more often than not, it would be let's look on a forum. Let's look on a forum, let's Google the problem, let's see what we can find, let's do our own research, right? And that mentality has helped me out immensely in my Linux usage because, oh boy, a lot of problems are solved just by looking at forum posts. But when I stopped trying to understand this system as a Windows experience, and I'm just like, okay, let's take a step back. We gotta realize this is Linux. Things work differently here. Let's try to learn how things work differently. And it became a lot easier, like I said. So, on one hand, I do want that accommodation there, but I also want there to be more documentation geared specifically for people who are used to Windows. Maybe rename a couple of programs. Maybe have like a manual at the start to say, hey, are you a Windows user? Maybe read through these couple of paragraphs of information. Here's some bullet points of like, oh, if you're used to using this program, then this is a Linux alternative. Or if you're used to doing things this way on Windows, then maybe check out this solution here on Linux. Just stuff to make that information more readily available is what I'm asking for. And while I was able to find that, I also need to realize that I'm me. I'm not you. I'm not Linus. I'm not anybody. I am me and only me. So my thought processes are obviously going to differ. So, and I know that a lot of the times when I solve problems, I solve them in different ways to other people, so this is just like a curse of mine, where I'm just in my own fucking bubble most of the time, and people are like, well, how the fuck did you solve this problem? And it's like, oh, I did this, 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 and this. And they're like, what the fuck, I never thought to do that. And it's like, what do you mean you never thought? Whatever. I'm getting too far in this. The second thing that I also wanted to briefly touch upon is the negative community responses and all that stuff. And yeah, that is a problem, but it's really not. It is and it isn't. It is a big problem and it's not a big problem. So here's where I stand on this. 99% of the people who have spoken to me about Linux have been really open, really friendly, really chill, welcoming, every single good thing under the book. They've been amazing. The Linux community has been very welcoming to me. But I'm a human. We're all humans. We all have similar thought processes on a lot of things because that's just how human brains work. Humans have what's called a negativity bias. Now, what does that mean? I barely know, but I'm going to try to explain it to you anyway. Let's take this in the context of a fighting game. Let's say we're playing Skullgirls, all right? Or nobody plays fucking Skullgirls anymore. Let's say we're playing Street Fighter, all right? Everybody knows what Street Fighter is. Let's say that in the latest patch of the latest Street Fighter game, my main character, Ryu, I don't actually play Ryu, but for the sake of argument, Ryu got nerfed, and that made him 10% weaker than when he was in the previous patch. Okay, that feels awful. Your main got nerfed, so he's less effective. Well, what if Ryu, instead of getting nerfed in the next patch, he got buffed in the same patch? And that buff made him 10% more effective than he was previously. Now, we can look at both of these split results and say that, well, logically speaking, the buff and the nerf affect Ryu in the exact same way. Just one is positive, one is negative. They're similar levels of buff and nerf, right? But that nerf is going to feel twice as bad when compared to a buff of the same level. And that is negativity bias. In the 5 or 6 Linux videos I've made recently, one person has been nasty, has been rude, has been gatekeeping, one person. Everybody else has been very welcoming. But I still remember that one person. Now, does that negative comment and that negative person affect me in my everyday life? No. I'm not having like aneurysms over the fact that one person doesn't like me on the internet. I'm not losing my mind over it. But if I think about it and I look back on how much negativity have I received, I'm gonna remember that one guy, because that's how human brains work. We're able to focus on negative emotions way easier than if we were to focus on positive emotions. I don't fucking know why this is the case. I can't tell you that, but I do know that that is a thing. You can look up negativity bias, and it is a real goddamn thing. So, while most of the Linux community is very welcoming to new users, the Linux community needs to do a little bit of a better job of weeding out and snuffing out those flames of toxicity, right? Because they exist, and even receiving one negative or belittling or condescending comment from one person, that can ruin someone's day or can ruin someone's entire experience, not just on Linux, but on anything, right? I recognize that not everyone has as thick skin as I do. I grew up on the internet, so like whatever. To expect other people to conform to my understandings of how things work is ridiculous. I need to recognize that other people are more sensitive to certain things than others, right? So coming at a question with an answer that, while it may be helpful, sounds rude, that can make someone want to distance themselves from Linux entirely, right? It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what the question is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If the person is asking the question in a nice and genuine manner, and they actually want to learn, do not respond with rudeness or any negative emotions, because no one deserves that. So, that being said, if someone's coming in and being an asshole and being a Karen while asking a question, yeah, whatever, fair game, fuck them, who cares? But most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, people are genuinely trying to learn and understand what their problem is and how to properly fix it. Even if the question is in the manual, you can always just say, hey, look, we've already answered this question, it's in the manual, thank you for your fucking curiosity or whatever, but you can go to this section of the manual and you can learn and solve the problem from there. That's good enough, right? That is absolutely good enough for answering their questions, because it tells them exactly where they need to go and it pushes them in the right direction to learn on their own. Not being RTFM, read the fucking manual noob. Like, that's just rude, you know? And I've seen Linus get tons of hate for this shit. I've seen some wild fucking comments. Now, granted, I did go on Reddit and sort these comments by controversial, so of course I was gonna get the shit and the filth of Reddit. But even the fact that it's there, I saw one dude genuinely claim that we as a community need to gatekeep people more because Linus is being stupid. I saw someone comment on my last video saying that Linus is acting like a challenged person. What the fuck kind of mental gymnastics are you pulling that you need to gatekeep people from something they're genuinely interested in using? What the fuck, dude? In conclusion, this video is pretty much over, so we're gonna go ahead and end this video. I think what Linus and Luke are doing is ultimately a good thing, because I'm actually learning things that I didn't know beforehand. Like, I gotta admit that I'm still a new user. I've barely been running Linux for more than a couple months. So, like, obviously I'm going to learn things, obviously I'm going to improve, and seeing these videos really paints it in a different perspective, where I have my experience of learning Linux and growing and doing all that stuff, but it's way easier to teach people when you have a better understanding of how people will interact with with Linux, you know? So I feel like I'm learning just by watching this, and I'm also learning way more by making these response videos. So hey, everybody's fucking winning, right? I didn't know that the refresh button was even a thing until I watched this video and went to some comments on a Reddit thread, and it was like, hey, you actually can use a refresh button. You actually can use a minimize all windows widget. All this stuff that I just showed you in this video, I learned yesterday. So constant learning, constant growth, constant all that jargon. Anyway, now that all that spiel's out of the way, this is actually a little bit shorter than the other ones. Maybe. I don't fucking know if it's actually shorter. But Now that we're through all that nonsense, let me go ahead and thank the patrons because they help me out directly, and it's very nice of them, and they're very kind, and I love them. If you want to become a patron, there will be a link at the end of the video, as well as in the description down below. If you do become a patron, you get access to bonus videos, behind-the-scenes content, fancy shout-outs like the ones that you're seeing on the screen right now, and maybe a few other things that are coming in the future. And even if you can't become a patron, the fact that you're hearing my words right now is more than enough. You have no idea how much watching to the end of the video helps me and helps the algorithmic gods of YouTube. So that's enough. Liking, sharing, commenting, that all helps. I actually saw some people share my videos on both Linux.org and the Linus Tech Tips forum. So that was pretty cool. Maybe we could do that again. I don't fucking know. Any help is still help. And even if you can't throw me $1, just liking the video and commenting is plenty. If you would like to watch another video of mine, hey, I just put out a video that is all about my video production and how I make my videos here on Linux. So if you're at all interested in that, that'll be... Fuck it. That'll be at the end of the video in the pop-ups that come up in the final credits. So you can go watch that there. It was actually pretty interesting having to go in and talk about all my Linux stuff. It was fun. I like talking about how I make my videos because it's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. So whatever. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a good one.